Not at all. I don't think anybody really wants to face Energy. Although, like we said, there have been some rumblings around Europe that Energy might have slipped a little bit. People saying that Orbit might be the #1 team to look at. I don't know, after that last performance, I certainly think that it's at least in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Dignitas, like we said, they've definitely got some things to work on. I think they can bring it through in the gauntlet. You know, it's not all out for them yet. But Orbit, I think, are definitely a power force to be looking out for in EU, especially for NRG. I'd be a little bit concerned, honestly, because they've definitely shown that they have the ability to adapt more than enough to other team strats, and they're definitely capable. Like, all those players are able to really recognize what's going to happen. They all have really good map awareness, really good mechanics, and I think that that's important, like, for helping them push through these tough situations.
Right, it's a great starting point. I mean, Dignitas, make no bones about it. I mean, this is a team that I personally have been pretty high on. I like what they have. I think they've got a lot of the raw materials to become a team and jump to that next level. But really what you got to look at is that adaptation. We talked about the issue. We have identified it. That's step one. Step two is making the changes. Anatoly, you're a player. Taco, you're a high-level player close to the team. How does Dignitas alter their gameplay to really be able to tackle the tankiness and the sustain?
So right now what they have to do is maybe they need to be the ones running this composition and take that option away from Orbit and see if they're successful at it. At this point in time, they have nothing to lose, so maybe they should run this strategy. Instead, they're going to ban out the Khepri. They really don't want to deal with this kind of tanky composition at all.
I like the fact that they're banning out the Khepri because I think it'll give FrostiaK, it won't force him into that Alquan pick.
Yeah.
I feel like that Alquan pick in the last game was a little bit forced, and I mean, it's not something that FrostiaK isn't capable of playing by any means. It's just that I would rather see him on more of like a Thor or a Batz or something that can alleviate some of the pressure from that duo lane, because a lot of times Qvo was just applying so much attention into the solo lane that it was causing freedom. Like, Orbit just had freedom to just rotate freely into that duo lane. I think it was pretty stressful for Dig to try and work around.
Absolutely. And like you said, I think it was clear to pretty much everybody watching that game that FrostiaK has had games where he has been a little bit more comfortable. I think that's the nicest way to put it. The Ao Kuang is, honestly, it's funny the way Ao Kuang has worked because he's been top pick, top ban for such a long time, and yet I think it's a minority of SPL players that can actually play him at a really top level. So Batz is going to be the choice for Orbit as they start the selection. Orbit has banned out the Freya and the Susano this time around, stepping away from the Jing ban that we've seen so often.
Sometimes you go for a kind of a identity check whether or not you want to run the Ao Kuang or any jungler specifically, but sometimes you have to go into your strengths, like you mentioned before, the Thor, even the Fenrir for FrostiaK. He's been known to play that kind of a style. If he wants to be aggressive, he can definitely alleviate a lot of pressure with this kind of a god, but it's going to be now Dignitas running this kind of a tanky, sustained composition like we were mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, I forget which one of you guys said it. You guys just sort of
totally,
blend into each other.
I won't take it.
You should have taken the credit. In any event, Totally, you said, hey, you know what, maybe it's time you identified what's going wrong. Why don't you just wear the outfit yourself? And that's what Dig's going to do. They've got the tanky Gab to shield to sort of provide that CC mitigation. And then, of course, you've got Ra, who is the quintessential out-of-combat healer. We saw Lawbster really work this character very, very well in the game #1. So hopefully Dignitas can channel some of that success that Orbit saw before.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're going with the tanky strat as well, mostly because of the fact that the Batz, they had a really difficult time working around Qvo's ults in that last game. So hopefully now that they have more of, especially with the double Guardian comp that's going to be coming out, I think they're looking for that Sanguine strat idea of trying to set up Shadow there in the mid lane on that raw pick, and it will definitely make things a lot easier for the team as a whole to not die instantly whenever the bots does tend to disperse them and cause that disorientation around the team.
Yep. You have great initiation, you have great peel coming out of Dignitas. It's really hard to come anywhere close to this raw. I was actually thinking that it was going to be a second Guardian for Dignitas. The question is, what was it going to be between the Ymir, Sobek, maybe even the Xingchen if they wanted to. But the walls is a great idea, trying to shut down this Guan Yu. If he gets caught out of position, that's going to be the primary target that Dignitas wants to shut down, because they don't want to have to worry about that mid to late game sustain.
FrostiaK on this Ymir. Going back to FrostiaK has actually had a very storied career here at the SPL. He's not one of the rookies. He's been around for a long time. And if I can think back to some of the earliest plays out of FrostiaK, this jungle Ymir is honestly one of the things that come to mind. Similar to how Lawbster digging real deep into the pockets to bring out the classic Ra, we're seeing that in FrostiaK here. A classic Ymir pick for the jungler. He'll be coupled with Rama, So that's likely to be on Suntouch. We'll see how he works out there. And the Terra. Will this be the selection coming out from Orbit as they have the option on their side?
Well, yeah, you can see that Orbit here opting. I'm pretty sure they want that Terra.
Ooh.
Okay, well, I mean, you still get the same kind of CC setup, in my opinion, even with the Bacchus flop into the Jing 1 with her knockup. So it's still a lot of free poke potential coming out of the Orbit duo lane, which I think is really important because I feel like as an individual, I don't think that Funballer necessarily has, like, it in himself. A lot of times he's getting set up, and I think Trixtank's been really crucial in helping set up Funballer for the majority of his kills. His team has done an excellent job playing around him and playing into him to help him really get those setups and kills that he needs to snowball ahead.
I like the Bacchus selection almost over the Terra, despite how powerful Terra is. I think when it comes to team fights, the way that Orbit want to run it, even with the Guan and who likes these extended team fights, Bacchus is more about the big bang attacks and more about that burst, and especially with Lawbster playing on that Zeus, you're going to be looking for that.
And it's going to be the last pick for Bellona right now for Team Dignitas. They're trying to get the Scourge to shut down the Jing, even some of the in-hands for Zeus.
So a lot of composition material coming out from Team Dignitas to attack what Orbit has brought. Team Dignitas now fighting for seeding and standing in the gauntlet, and like we mentioned before, they've identified their issue and they're going to try it out themselves. Team Dignitas with a new change going tanky and healing. Hinduman and Adonis, why don't we take a look at how this game's going to go?
Thank you so much, analysts. But hold the damn phone. That comp is Sanguine's comp, right?
That's a Sanguine comp right there.
Now, who does
even
this,
the Bellona?
Who does this benefit more here? Does this benefit Orbit because he gets to practice against the potential thing that Sanguine will do? Or does this benefit Sanguine knowing what Orbit are going to do against it?
Yeah, I mean, for the viewers at home that want to really understand this, first seed is still on the line between Sanguine and Orbit.
That's huge.
And that's going to be the last that's going to be the last game we see. And now Dignitas are running a Sanguine comp. This is both going to give insight to Sanguine on how Orbit is going to respond, but also Orbit are now getting practice against that comp because Orbit did not have to face this double Guardian healing comp that Sanguine brought out against everyone else. They faced Cherio in the jungle, not on Guardians, but on the Naja and Hunbats.
So Sanguine will be watching very closely to see how Orbit perform in this game with the composition they've drafted here. How well does the Zeus work? How well does Trixtank's Bacchus work and Funballer's Jing against this composition?
This is just going to be a learning experience for both Orbit and Sanguine. Now, Orbit, they still want to... So Orbit here still want to win a game, obviously cleanly. They want to have a lot of confidence going up against Sanguine. Obviously, energy in the other European group, you do not want to be on their side of the bracket. You want to come out first seed in your group.
Very, very big pressure on the boys here. Obviously, Dignitas across the way. Some of them known as Potato Boys, most of them known as Brexit Boys, and now all of them known as Gauntlet Boys going forward in this one. But they're still playing for pride, and they will play for pride as well.
It's got to be pride. I mean, they looked really devastated after that loss, but I think they're going to come and still give it their all, obviously. They want to be prepared for the gauntlet, and this is, regardless, this is still great prep for them. They're facing one of the top European teams.
Well, at the start of the game, there's going to be nothing too crazy going on between the two of them at the moment. We do see a curse coming out very early from Trixtank here. We saw the same thing at BigManTingz on the Bacchus up against the Rama mid lane.
And one of the biggest things about this curse, having it picked up first, is now you can utilize it without having to worry about a sprint. Obviously, by the time teams have all their relics online, you will see a sprint almost every single time, but when it's not online, it's so effective at ganking people.
Very funny to see actually Terra didn't get picked in this game whatsoever. Orbit hovered it for a second.
Have we
changed their mind?
Have we seen Terra at all this tournament?
Yes, we have seen it
once, right?
Xaliea has played it once.
It was in the solo. Oh yeah, okay. They
once
pushed
as well. So it's Orbit the ones that have really gone for this Terra more often than not when it has been available.
50 seconds into this one right now, and Orbit have a really good start to this game. They have the Zeus, which is great for mid-harpy control. Suntouch, though.
And there's the curse. But the curse coming around. The minion wave will get an impact in this as well. Obviously, with Funballer being so low in mana, he can't continue to chase.
And you saw that, too. The curse forced out the purification. I mean, Suntouch would have died had he not popped that, and now the belly flops are going to be that much easier for Trixtank to line up. Like, Suntouch, he can't push himself into any awkward spot in this lane, or it's going to be a follow-up kill.
especially with that purification being down as well. Agreed. And now the pressure is on them in this lane. Expected to see that pressure with a Jing and Bacchus versus a but this beginning of the game alone.
Of course. I mean, Funballer is going to be able to fully control this lane, and if he gets into any risky spot, the passive has been so useful to everyone playing Jing. Orbit really countering Dignitas here, or Suntouch specifically. They banned away a lot of his gods, including the Cupid, which we hadn't seen yet, so making that immediate adjustment, and then taking his Jing away.
And now Funballer just able to poke underneath the tier 1 tower here. Trixtank just happy just to sit back and wait there. Heading over to the mid lane, though, I think we expect to see a lot of aggression coming out from Dignitas this game, and counter initiation from Orbit.
They have the great lineup. They have the freeze in the walls combined with the raw snipe, and they're up against a Zeus. Ymir does very well against the Zeus, who has no way to get over his walls if he's caught out in the jungle. Lawbster gonna have to pay attention to his positioning as well, very important. But he does have QvoFred in the jungle, and that Fear No Evil will disrupt any gank that FrostiaK and ShadowNightmare are trying to force.
Do you like the idea coming out from Dignitas, though? BigManTingz here has started with the Blink Relic, which does give a secondary initiation for them. But talking about initiation, in pressure is FrostiaK. Another rotation from Trix is here, keeping him trapped in Lawbster's ult, and Trix will take first blood.
Perfect fight there. Orbit recognizing that QvoFred was on the rotation. They just immediately went on FrostiaK. He popped his purification. He only thought that was a 2v2 and he could stand and fight. Instead, though, the loop around from Trixtank, he wasn't expecting it. Got knocked up inside the Zeus ult, and Orbit just perfect execution of a gank in mid.
Yeah, Cuvo more than anything else there was just so pressuring with that ultimate. They just came out of nowhere, really. One step forward from FrostiaK, and in the end, the Fear No Evil forced a purification.
That's the scariest thing about Trixtank and Orbit, is that Trixtank, you'll see him just walk into the jungle so much, like just instantly. And so you don't know if you need to call for the missing or if he's just kind of baiting and sitting around here. Trixtank walks straight over, and FrostiaK actually got initiated on, I think, before Dignitas even had the chance to make the call. If they were like, okay, I think he's rotating, he hasn't come back in the lane yet, but by then FrostiaK was already in the fight.
Well, no one knows where the fat man goes. At the moment, though, he's hanging around the left-hand side here. He knows that red buff is available, and making sure that ShadowNightmare can't just rotate over there just now, as Lawbster will help him soak experience in mid.
I expect Trixtank to go into the shoes of the Magi now. He's got a kill under his belt. He got first blood, so he's going to have a ton of gold and a curse. More than likely, Trix is going to be looking to set up ganks across the map. Bacchus, with Shoes and the Magi, especially against opponents who are down in levels, really shreds.
We always talk about the core coming out from Orbit here. Trixtank, QvoFred, and Lawbster have been together for such a long time. And Trixtank and Cuvo, peas in a pod, they're literally brothers. They're not actually related, but they seem that way.
They are always over at each other's house, but there's a blink in for BigManTingz. Fear No Evil on top, and the snipe hits on a Lawbster, but he's still alive. Eats FrostiaK's full ultimate. QvoFred answers back.
But BigManTingz in an awkward spot here, needs some help trying to sustain, but he won't sustain through the damage from QvoFred, who gets a double. Now that Somersault's going to slow down Shadow, and on the rotation is Xaliea.
Ooh, the snipes from across the map there. Suntouch connects onto one for QvoFred, but he's too healthy. He has the Guan if he wants to sustain. And ShadowNightmare there, full committing with this team, just stayed a little bit too long. We saw Xaliea rotating in. Ducky, I believe, had just back, which left, yeah, he just backed, and we could just see the perfect rotation from Xaliea in response.
But exactly what Orbit wants to do in this game as well. Let Dignitas come onto them. Frosty will telegraph the play by walling off and walking forward, and QvoFred goes, all right, Fear No Evil, make sure we can counter this.
The Fear No Evil has been used to disrupt more than anything. Obviously, FrostiaK did eat it for a gank for first blood earlier on, but that time was pure just, let me keep Lawbster alive. When you play a Zeus without an escape, or any mage without an escape, you really want to have a jungler that's going to be able to protect you through these early game fights, especially against such a pretty clean and clear like gank initiation setup from FrostiaK and ShadowNightmare, where it's freeze wall snipe, right, every time, or at least freeze bait the purification, then line it up. And so QvoFred on this Batz is just going to be pretty much hip to hip with Lawbster the whole game.
Well, I've never expected to come into this game and not know who was actually going to be the #1 seed coming out from this group at the moment. Orbit still vying for that. Have to face Sanguine later on, as Trixtank on the right-hand side going to catch Ducky in an awkward spot, who engages again, trying to trade out, knowing he was going to die anyway, but Trixtank with the Intoxicate will secure that kill.
He got actually very close, and also Xaliea forced to use an ult there. BigManTingz is looping around Funballer, and Dignitas, I think, want to fight this. Ting's ultimate is online right now.
And Suntouch took a lot of free damage there. Good Cataclysm coming out, but
quick
will
reaction.
Force the airstrike out of Funball.
They don't know this is happening. QvoFred, no blink. He's trying to find Suntouch. but they're going to let Suntouch back. I think they're now baiting Tingz. Look at this.
I think
Tingz
they
is
will.
clapping in lane.
Because you saw Funballer doing it back to him as well. Cataclysm's down, remember that. The shield will come up, the rollout is good.
What a
he
bait.
will get away.
I mean, he gets out, but that was such a beautiful bait. I don't know if Funballer started the clapping or Tingz did, but
think they both
Funballer
did.
made sure to clap because he had no idea QvoFred was sitting over that corner. If the ultimate from Fred is a little bit better placed and kind of forces Geb into the lane towards Funballer, that's a kill.
You don't see too many of these mind games coming out from the players
No.
in the SPL. You do from supports most of the time. But when it comes to LAN, there's a lot more of these mind games, these claps, these taunts that try and lure the enemy into an uncomfortable
I mean,
position.
it's not even the in-game, just the just yelling, right?
Yes.
Being very vocal, and that's gonna that's gonna get in players' head if they hear you say, "Hey, you're poop," right? Like Funballer said
Lawbster
earlier.
has to ult, got frozen in place, and Shadow will clean him up with a fantastic snipe. Now the other snipe's coming on from Rama, but Suntouch can't reach that far into the distance, unfortunately. And Lawbster falls down once again, the sacrificial lamb of Orbit.
And there's the comp, there's the bread and butter of Dignitas' comp when it comes to the early game. Now, we've been talking so much about how they haven't been able to really match pace in the early game, but coming to late game and mid game is where this team is really going to shine. Once we start seeing Dignitas group up, the raw heals are so effective in Orbit. They do have the Guan U, but when it comes to sieging, I got to give it over to Dig.
Yeah, for sure. If this game goes on as well, to continue putting the pressure on QvoFred on the right-hand side. Now he's been everywhere on the map, and every single time he's got his Fear No Evil up, he's looking at a different lane every time to gank.
And it's not only QvoFred you have to worry about. Like, Trixtank was in solo lane earlier too. Now that he had that lead and he did go the shoes of the Magi, he's just going to keep putting pressure across the map. This is exactly what QvoFred and Orbit want to do. They don't want Dignitas to start coming back into this game, start grouping up. They don't want to have to fight over Gold Furies. They just want to snowball, finding picks, finding objectives.
Freeze onto QvoFred. He'll take a bit of poke, but doesn't panic and purify away. Trixtank around the back will flop onto 2, however. Good shield coming out from BigManTingz to delay the damage, and good Cataclysm too will disengage that fight.
Start of the fight there, BigManTingz not only has the knock-up onto Trixtank after the belly flop, meaning he couldn't immediately ult, but also the Cataclysm during the overhand smash and Lawbster in the range as well means Dignitas can easily get back to their tower and to safety.
Good work from that Geb there. 5-2 in favor of Orbit here. Still no Gold Furies taken so far in this game, but you can see decent lead for Orbit.
And Funballer has just been continuously pressuring Suntouch. You can even see him holding waves here. As I say that, he does the wave, but
Just push now.
he almost saved the wave.
And the benefit of Funballer, obviously on a Jing wave, we talk about this quite a lot, but the passive comes into play so much. Easy rotations around the map pretty much gets you back to a tier 1 tower in any lane.
And Funballer has come out with this no lifesteal build. I think he built lifesteal once so far this tournament, and it was like 6th or 5th slotted. It's pretty late into his build where you'll typically see it earlier on. And Jingwei's passive is just perfect for this build style where you can take these 1v1s fights, you can take poke yourself and still go back into lane without losing any farm.
Also things like, I mean, Ataraxia was speaking to me on the podcast and he was saying like things like the Wind Demon and the Poison Star.
Yes.
So good on Jingwei because she has crit built into a kit.
And also just the disruption. Like, Orbit's composition is very AoE focused where it's all about disrupt. Not only the Gust, they have the Fear No Evil, the belly flop, and then even on top of that, right, you really don't want to fight Xaliea when he's got his horse online.
Well, level 12 has started to be hit now. Funballer, first of all, will have his Relic available, as will QvoFred in the jungle, but Suntouch winning that trade nicely. As we said, though, you know, you can just base.
Ducky, right-hand side here. He's going to be okay, but Xaliea might not be. Nice dash from Xaliea there, avoiding the freeze.
Fantastic mechanical reposition there. 180 spin and then straight past the wall as well. If you do dash into a wall, though, and you are aimed slightly away from it, you will slide and glide across that wall anyway.
You gotta go through the full animation, but you still gotta time it right. It's not the easiest thing, and that freeze is a pretty big cone.
Yeah, there's a attempted steal from QvoFred. I'm not sure if he did get those ones there on the right-hand side, as Dignitas still trying to farm up. We approach 10 minutes in.
This is great for Dignitas. I mean, they're still down 2K. They don't really have any pressure across the map, but Orbit haven't been able to just roll into their jungle and steal anything. Here's the first attempt we're really seeing. QvoFred looking for touch.
Suntouch going to force his ultimate too, and Suntouch is going to use 2 snipes, and Fear No Evil's waiting for him on landing. Forced to purify away. The heal's not going to be there, but ShadowNightmare covering him will allow Suntouch to survive.
Not sure if that was a call that Suntouch's speeds were down But at the very least, he did force it. And once again, QvoFred going into the CDR build, that ultimate is going to be online much sooner than those purifications.
At the same time, they got Suntouch's ultimate and his purification, though, so it's a big win for them. The bad news is they just hit level 12, however, so he will have Sanctuary as a second relic.
That's true. And Ducky here just pressuring on Xaliea with this Bellona Guan Yu matchup, doing a good job of controlling him, trying to steal away this blue buff, but Trix is already on the rotation.
Yeah, the blue buff still being looked at, but Ducky realizing he may be under pressure as the calls come from mid lane there, so we'll fall back to farming up. Has his blue buff anyway, just trying to delay Xaliea.
I mean, he's got a 200 gold lead despite dying to Trixtank his ganks, so he's been doing a good job of controlling Xaliea. And right now, Dignitas aren't really winning in any lane outside of this one, so they really want to utilize the pressure. Because even if the gank comes through, even if Trix starts to rotate, at the very least, you force that rotation, which opens up opportunities if Lawbster's left alone or QvoFred's on the wrong side of the map to look for either ganks to take or try and sneak a Gold Fury.
And that's the funny thing. I mean, we talk about QvoFred and where he is on the map, and he's everywhere at the moment. This guy's just going all over the place. A lot of talk about him so far this year, especially because he's always been a dark horse in the jungle. He's never really underperformed as such, but people are starting to see the shining light in this player now.
He's always been a high-level competitive player. And I'm going to go back to an interview, actually, that we had with Trixtank and during one of their online games. I think it was against Obey, where we just saw QvoFred go off, which we typically don't see him do often. He has some solid games, but Trixtank here a little bit caught out.
Oh, but the ult from Lawbster's going to put him in an awkward spot. Ting's in the worst spot, forced to Cataclysm as well. The fallback as well from FrostiaK on that Ymir. The tanks were really injured in that engagement.
And once again, I mean, just the perfect ult from QvoFred, disengaging against Dignitas. Lawbster and Trixtank a little bit caught out there, and they were able to just successfully reset without even being pressured once. And QvoFred has seemed to put a lot more effort into this split than he ever did. Trixtank on the interview said, I don't really know what happened to Qvo this game, but all I know is that he really had wanted to beat Obey. He had studied all their game, watched them all, like had been fully prepared, and that seems to be Orbit this season.
Well, Suntouch is now in trouble as well. That monkey toss was on the mark as well. Trix waiting for the flow. Gonna try and time it. Not this time, Trixie baby. Sanctuary will stun him in place though, but they don't have the cleanup. Another rotation is slowly on its way. BigManTingz here to help, and Shadow coming in too.
Suntouch actually getting saved there because of the fight that happened in mid lane. Orbit forced to use a lot of ults to disengage, help Trixtank out, and because of that, they didn't have the ultimates to secure the kill on Suntouch. But once again, they're just pressuring him out of lane, especially against a Jing. This is devastating. Already a decent goal difference between the two, both of them on 0-0-0, but that 500 gold lead for Funballer are going to come into play once these power spike items are hit.
We can actually see level 12 has been hit now for FrostiaK in the jungle. Do we expect to see a blink coming out from the Ymir for this game? Maybe it's just for a little bit more engage, or with one blink enough?
I don't know, right? Because you almost could have expected FrostiaK to go blink, and then BigManTingz doesn't need it. He can go for more of the defensive peel style. You don't really need both Guardians blinking into the back line, because that's defeating the purpose of your composition, which should be centered around keeping ShadowNightmare alive and fighting around him and his healing. I think if FrostiaK goes for the blink, it's a little bit of a mistake instead of getting something like a shell or a meditation to help keep his mid laner alive.
Now, ShadowNightmare did the same sort of thing he did in the previous game, where he sold his second item there to get his Warlock Slash online a little bit earlier here. And, you know, Tony said it's sometimes worthwhile, but it does delete some gold in the inventory.
It does, and actually ShadowNightmare might not be alive for much longer here. Does burn his ultimate and stays alive for a second.
This is a good fight for Dignitas, actually. It's the boys of Orbit that have got to turn tail, especially the monkey. And now Ducky rotating as well. Has Eagle's Rally available. Could look for a big group up of men, but the stun from Trix will slow them down again.
Actually QvoFred still hanging around here. Trix goes in, 4-man Intoxicate, but now he's overextended. Ducky's got to get out, though. Very defensive ult.
And FrostiaK going to try and peel Lawbster from dealing damage and ults himself in place. Rama in the sky looking for the shots, but not going to find anything, as it's Frosty the first one down. Orbit reinitiate. Airstrike for Doom. Delete ShadowNightmare.
Ducky going to fall as well. Last hit, Xaliea picks it up. This is going to either be a Gold Fury or a Tower Siege right now, and it seems like the tier 1's on Orbit's mind. And just miscommunications in the comms. Ducky ults defensively while we see FrostiaK push forward, gets a really nice freeze and a really nice wall, but without those protections from the Eagles rally, Dignitas just can't fight into it.
And the Golf Fury is started up by Orbit here as well. As you see Qvo and Trixtank zone duty, keeping an eye on where the Dignitas boys were. They double-checked Suntouch in Naval. With the comms, I could tell that. And they went, okay, yeah, we can fall back now. They're not going to contest.
4,100 lead now for for Orbit, and they're going to be able to start to snowball this. You could see the full Jotun's almost online for Qvo. He's been very liberal with his ultimate, just kind of throwing it out anytime he needs to, defensively, offensively, and once he gets the full CDR or 30% CDR online, we're just going to see that up multiple times in team fights. That's very good against a composition like Dignitas that is really going for more extended engagements.
Very true. It's really only QvoFred, you know, that is going to burn those purification. I mean, yes, you've got Funballer and Trixtank with flops, but you have to presume it's going to land on you before it's even casted most of the time to stop it.
We should probably see some Magi's Blessings coming out of any players here who feel like they're getting flopped on too much or hard initiated by QvoFred, because Trixtank isn't the primary initiator, it's the Hunbats, and as long as you don't get knocked up by the Jingwei Gust or by Bacchus Belly Flop, you're going to immune that Fear No Evil.
Well, FrostiaK comes to the right-hand side here, has Curse, but he's actually uncalled. Is it a Curse or it's Sunder? I think it's Sunder, actually.
No, are we talking about Xaliea?
No,
that's
FrostiaK.
That's a spray. Oh, that's a Sunder.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It looked like Curse because it's the same color. We need to change that. Why is it the same color?
I don't know. I was looking at Xaliea Sprit, and I thought you were just crazy at the time.
No, I thought it was a Curse, but Sunder again.
I mean, this is they're literally stealing Sanguine's composition. Even the build style, Celestial Legion Helm picked up by Ymir.
Join them.
I mean, the composition is working, but it's the thing where Sanguine have been practicing that comp, I'm sure, a ton in prep for LAN. But I don't know if Dignitas have. I mean, we haven't seen this playstyle from them yet. And while FrostiaK is very tenured on the Ymir, typically we see ShadowNightmare on the Giannis when he pulls it out in the online stages.
I'd say more sanguine here. You know, they came in with the teamwork. The teamwork is what pushed them through this, whereas Dignitas, they can rely a little bit more on mechanical skill.
Yeah, but I don't know if they know how to pull off this comp like Sanguine did. I don't know if they just took the comp and didn't watch their games or what exactly happened.
Big gank on the right-hand side here onto Ducky. Eagles rising at the right time, cancelling out that Fear No
Nice
Evil.
job.
You heard the noise, but it didn't go off.
The beginning of the ting there, but it's not CC immune, so you can be canceled out of it. But Funballer, this is brutal for Suntouch because he's been ganked so much. Even though he survived and hasn't had a death, he's just so far behind.
Freeze from FrostiaK, but that wall will slow them down.
Qvo.
I say that. QvoFred in the back. They still want FrostiaK, who's body blocked to death. Big shield from Tingz will protect him, but Ducky has no Eagles rally here. Big Cataclysm again from Tingz. Great knock-up from him as well. FrostiaK now going to peel, but he should fall down himself.
He's getting the heals from ShadowNightmare and the reduced damage from the passive doing wonders.
Turn around.
And Qvo stays too long. BigManTingz now rolling in. Cataclysm not online. Look at this. Perfect body blocks. And here comes Suntouch as well, focusing on Lawbster. But it's not going to be enough. Trix the only one left alive.
And Trix are going to flop away into the enemy jungle. He won't live for long. The benefit, however, for Orbit here is where Funballer is. He takes a tier 1 time on the left-hand side just to answer things back.
There it is, though, playing around that raw heal. FrostiaK not backing into the tower, winning an opportunity to, instead standing strong. On top of that, he pops his ultimate. The change to Ymir, for those who haven't seen him in competitive play in a while, is that when he hits you with an ability, not only does the Frostbite do extra damage, but it's reducing the damage of anyone hit by 10%, which comes in important when you're sustaining with a raw.
But we saw the same thing out of Orbit yet again there, where the over-aggress felt a little bit too confident.
Yeah.
And then they paid the price one more time. If they do that against Sanguine, they might not be #1 seed going into Super
And I
Regionals.
think Orbit are kind of realizing what this comp's about now, because despite FrostiaK being level 13 to QvoFred 17, like, he lived for a very long time, and QvoFred did not get off of him for at least 10 seconds straight.
Well, 19 minutes and 8-4 right now. Gold Fury is down for about another minute and a half after the first one done by Orbit as well. And the Golden Experience in a very comfortable position.
Right now, they are still very confident. They probably want to get another Gold Fury before they really start pressuring in. Now they're going to play it a little bit more calculating and slow. I expect to see the focus on ShadowNightmare continue. That's what we've seen QvoFred look for with his Blink initiations. It's Alt Shadow, Alt Shadow, Alt Shadow. And BigManTingz has been responding in kind. He's very quick with these shields to keep his raw alive.
Yeah, this gap seems very, very strong for BigManTingz here today. Although FrostiaK seems to be a lot of focus of attention from the team too. And maybe that is just planning against Sanguine. Cherio is going to play the Ymir. And if he does do that against the boys of Orbit, they're going to focus Cherio down because they know he's a big important man of that team.
The difference is, though, that FrostiaK is really far behind, so it's a lot easier to pick him off. Cherio hasn't really been in a position in the games he's played on the Ymir and kind of the Guardian styles where he's this far behind, right? He's really been ahead. And so now Orbit are getting an idea of where this Ymir's at when behind, which is still very hard to kill.
Now, over this weekend as well with this Group A going on and dance, we've seen a lot of sustained, a lot of Guardians coming out from these compositions. Do we expect that from the other groups going forward, or will each one be a different meta?
I almost want to say it's going to be a little bit of a different meta, because the only reason double Guardian sustain started happening in this group is because of Sanguine. No one else was running it on day one.
And so because of that one, like, everybody's just had to adapt to that for this group.
They have to adapt to it, but also a lot of other teams are going to get a look at this. I'm sure, like, if I'm a competitive player in groups B, C, or D, I am watching these games and at least seeing kind of where the meta's at for those groups. Maybe it's a strategy that they can take into mind into their sets, and so it's something you have to think about at the very least.
Orbit looking to pressure the red buff on the left-hand side here, at least onto Suntouch at the best, but the rotation from Dignitas wrapping around the back. They tried that in game 1, and once again, Orbit spotted it out.
I have no idea how Qvo restrained himself there and not teleporting in. 3 members were grouped up. He has Purification up. It would have been a pretty solid engage, but Orbit trying to play it slow and jump over the freeze, though.
Intoxicate on ShadowNightmare. ShadowNightmare falls at the back. Rama in the sky looking for snipes, but too early. Ducky gets a good Eagles rally up, but the snipe doesn't really do anything for ShadowNightmare. Trixtank on his own duty, but a good calculation from BigManTingz will slow him. Now Xalia's back in, and the horsey, don't you stop. Just let those hooves go. Clippity clop. Reset from both teams.
Perfect play from Dignitas. Finally, Ducky ults in place with Eagles Rally, giving so many protections to the team fight around, and you saw all of Dig fighting inside ShadowNightmare's heals. That's what they need to do with this composition. They're going to be able to hold fairly easily. All the ults from Orbit burned as well. Obviously, everything traded out. It's only Airstrike left open, and now I don't think Orbit, without their ultimates, can burst through the raw heals.
Doesn't seem like the case. They're going to just all fall back. The boys of Orbit there realize they can't get anything else out of that. Only ultimate available in this game is the Airstrike from Funballer.
Like, Orbit have to rely on ultimates to secure kills, I think, because just all these relics that are up, the raw heals, the disruption from the Ymir freezes and Geb shields, like, it's just too much. And now Dig are actually using this opportunity to poke in.
Really good opportunity, but they've got Trixtank's going to just go in here and look for aggression. The cavalry charge is back up.
Oh, and look at this. Fear No Evil is up, but 2 perfect timing. No one's died just yet from Dignitas, though. They're going to be resetting back to the raw heal up.
Well, they
I think we're in for a long game. I think we're in for a really long game.
But Dig win that trade. They get a tier 1 tower and they all survive.
Yeah, and the raw heals are going to be so much better in these sieging opportunities than the Guan Yu. It's just not enough coming out in kind of one fashion. And as long as Dignitas, and we didn't even talk about the Eagles rally before, but imagine trying to fight into a double Guardian lineup that's sitting in a raw heal inside 50 protections from Bellona ult.
And not just that, then there's a Void. Sorry, you've also got the Witchblade online for Ducky as well. Lowering attack speed coming in from Funballer, and actually impacts Lawbster on his in hands to get those stacks.
It's not going to be easy, and also a lot of protections built for Dignitas. You could see anti-healing picked up for Ducky there.
Where's Funballer?
He's very deep.
He's on a very merry adventure right now, it seems.
I think he's going to try and loop around.
Has he started scrimming already?
I think he's trying to split push right now because they recognize all of Sanguine are on the right. This is going to be a free tower. Orbit they shouldn't really force a fight here. They should just make sure that Dignitas can't back to defend, and that's exactly what's going to happen. You can see Dignitas just rotating over to try and defend their tier 2, but QvoFred's already waiting in place, and that Fear No Evil, it's up again.
But he's not going to worry too much there until the rest of the squad of Dignitas roll in. Tier 1 tower drops in mid lane. Dignitas still a net win, however. They got the tier 1 right and the tier 1
And look at this. Again, though, Orbit, they're just like keeping eyes on to Dignitas the whole time. Funballer is now starting this Gold Fury. QvoFred jumps over the wall. He didn't see Sanguine, excuse me. Why did I say them? He didn't see Dignitas at all.
And now the Gold Fury's getting low, but the boys are here. Snipes coming out.
Oh!
And they pick up QvoFred.
Xaliea picked it up again.
And the Gold Fury goes the way of Dignitas.
Dig fighting back into this. Their composition really starting to shine now that they're grouped as 5. It was not working when Suntouch was getting bullied in the left, Ducky getting ganked in the right, FrostiaK overextending in the mid. But now that they're fighting as a team, that's what if they watch Sanguine's games, that's all they did. They just were rotating as a 5-man unit around the map.
But Orbit forced this. They're the ones that grouped first and said, come on, Dig, you got to come and join us in a 5v5. And since then, Dig's like, all right, this is good. We can do this.
And I think Orbit are... See, here's the thing, is that every team has played against this composition that Sanguine has brought, except for Orbit.
That's
Again,
true.
The first match Sanguine played was against Orbit, and they did not run the Guardian jungle. They did not run the raw mid. What they ran was assassins in the jungle, and they got decimated. So they haven't had a look at this style yet, and now I think they're learning. You asked me at the beginning, who's this benefit more, Orbit or Sanguine? I think this is benefiting Orbit more for that final set today.
When I'm actually looking at this set as well, I mean, Orbit, they have been around a long time, and they've played through every single meta that's been thrown at them, so they've seen this before.
Okay, I think this core of Trix, Lawbster, and Qvo as Funballer goes aggressive.
A little bit too hot and heavy there. Going to get disarmed, forced to airstrike over the top. Will hover in the air to reposition as the fight unfolds. Zeus ultimate and Fear No Evil dropping down good damage, but nobody dying just yet. Ducky's in trouble, Eagle rallies in place. face. Gets a kill thanks to ShadowNightmare snipe. However, goes down in trade to Lawbster as FrostiaK cleans him up as well. Xaliea picks up FrostiaK, and the boys of Dig are trying to turn tail.
2 for 2 right now. Xaliea still pushing forward, though, and the healing's going to come through. This isn't an opportunity, I think, for either team to force an initiation at this point, and I love the adaptation of Qvo. He actually doesn't ult until we see the raw heal go down. Same thing with Lawbster. They hold it. The second the raw heal was down, Zeus ult goes on top. Fear No Evil pushes people out of it and into more damage from the chain lightning and detonates, and it was just really well calculated from Orbit. The main issue was that Funballer got picked at the start of that fight. I mean, he didn't die, but he was forced to ult away, so he wasn't able to get in a position to properly gust and set up for more kills for Orbit.
I feel Orbit really didn't want to engage there. It was more Funballer looking for an individual 1v1 that they had to take, and Dignitas responded well in kind. And you said you expect this game to go late. I do too, with how the engagements are rolling here, because they're relatively even trades right now in the middle of nowhere when there's nothing available to take.
I'm really going to give the edge to Dignitas right now if they could play it right. I think for Orbit, a lot of this is going to depend on QvoFred and his ultimate timings, where he's going to place it. Because Orbit, much like Dig in last game, it's going to come down to you need to kill the Raw. If you let the Raw live, if you let Dignitas fight inside that Eagles rally, it's too many protections for you to shred through unless you go full penetration and then you become squishy and the Guardian's just base damage is too high to deal with.
Now the sustain coming out from ShadowNightmare is very, very useful, but it's not the same level as we saw at Dodo's. He's not gone rid of a Sleepiest, and he's not got this Lotus Crown for the extra protections too.
But what he does have is the Warlock Sash, which has been kind of standard for his builds, and so he's got more health, and it's going to be harder, like we said, for QvoFred to lock down that kill. And look at this, QvoFred going straight into penetration every single item.
Frosty walking forward here, straight towards Lawbster, who gets frozen in place, and then Eagles running and sniped as well. Deleted, goodbye Lawbster, the sacrificial lamb once more. Ducky isolated from his team there, thanks to that wall from FrostiaK, but he'll be okay from now as Qvo was busy, keeping him all busy.
There's the blink. Oh, a blink coming out for BigManTingz, trying to slow down.
Good
monkey toss. QvoFred going to be able to escape that. And Lawbster just caught out alone. We saw QvoFred. He actually jumped on ShadowNightmare, but if he's the only one engaging on a Shadow, he doesn't have the damage yet to burst through him. Shadow literally just dropped his heal, kited around as much as possible. Qvo couldn't fight him, and then Lawbster was left alone. I mean, he got isolated without QvoFred having that ultimate to disrupt for Orbit. He's a free kill.
I mean, we say he was isolated alone. No, Frosty walked up to his face and froze him. And the rest of Orbit kind of stood and watched until it happened.
I mean, he was isolated by him. He was just there.
He was the rest of his team.
That was bad
Freeze
positioning.
again, this time on Trixtank, who has a flop to get away. No snipe available. Well, actually, it is for ShadowNightmare, but he's not using it yet.
There it is.
After the flop, maybe the Eagles rally. No, he didn't taste the tip. And now BigManTingz is going to get Trixtank off that, and they're going to look for Qvo.
Orbit's just running around like they're not grouped at all. That's 3 times in a row. First it was Funballer getting caught in the mid. Then it was Lawbster getting caught near that blue buff. And now Trixtank caught alone deep into his jungle. This is Orbit making individual mistakes more than anything. The best fight they've had against this comp so far has been using that Fear No Evil to disrupt the raw heal.
The worst thing I can see for Dignitas here, if you're a Dignitas fan, is the fact that this game is so much better than Game 1. In every way. And if they could have done this in Game 1...
I think they're regretting not building Sanguine style. Because Orbit hadn't seen it yet. Orbit are the only team who have not seen it yet.
Comp. And we've seen teams steal comps before.
Oh, Fire Giant. This is a full commit.
I was so confused.
Orbit's going to get it, but they need to back out.
That all about?
This is the biggest weakness of Dignitas' comp. They have 0 chase potential outside of Rom Snipe, so unless you can get someone low enough, like, you just can't chase them down. They have the double blink, but those are typically used in the middle of the engagement, not at the end trying to chase players through the jungle.
Very interesting little play there coming out, because I think even Dignitas fell for that too. Like, what are you doing, Qvo? What are you doing? Why'd you fake no evils? That was really weird.
That's twice now.
Did they get fired then? Oh, yeah, they did. Damn.
Well, this is going to be Gold Fury now for Dignitas. Going to be able to finally take the gold lead, but they're fighting into a Fire Giant team. Brawler's Beatstick has been finished for QvoFred, so that penetration online, but look at this, immediately the first real defensive item we've seen picked up from ShadowNightmare. It's going to be the Lotus Crown, now bonus protections.
Bonus for this whole team.
During the heal.
And now because of this as well, I don't think Dignitas are too worried about the Fire Giant team of Orbit. They're still winning these engagements, although the regen from Orbit will match the regen coming out from Raw.
Risky TP, they do get the knock up on FrostiaK. He's just going to reset, and Ducky has been taking a lot of damage. We've seen this most fights though, Orbit have really been focusing on him since he doesn't have any purification.
Well, agility just used by Funballer and a sprint used by Orbit too. Xalia's going in on the horse, looking straight towards the back line as FrostiaK looking to peel the front. In the sky is Suntouch looking for snipes as QvoFred gets a good fear, no evil off, but Frosty's still alive.
He needs the raw heal.
Bought him a moment.
Not enough. There's going to be the first pick of that fight, and now Orbit are pushing forward. They're not playing around the raw heals at all. Airstrike up the side. Ducky's going to be isolated. A 1v1 going on as Suntouch is surrounded by 4 on the other side, trying to fight in the raw heal. It's not going to be enough, though, and Orbit just walked through. Dignitas did not fight like they had in the previous fights. They all backed up. They got disrupted. FrostiaK did not have a raw heal on top of him. QvoFred was able to pick him off because of that.
And the Fire Giant still on 4 members of Orbit here as they head to the Phoenix. They'll get this left one for free. They've still got tier 2 towers and a tier 1 on the right, but it looks like they're going for the win.
I think this is almost needed from them. They don't feel like they can fight into Dignitas when they play their comp right, so instead they let Dignitas make a mistake, and now they're pushing in. Big crits coming out from Funballer. ShadowNightmare trying to reset, but the Titan's going to be shredded, and Orbit going to come up with the sweep after Dignitas looked like they were going to have that game too, just not able to close out. All it came down to was one single fight on the left-hand side.
Big important win for Orbit though. Obviously they get the 2-0, which gives them the 3 points and puts them back at the top of the standings, I believe, as well, before they go into this game against Sanguine.
This seeding, this last game is going to be all about seeding, and it's going to be very important for Orbit to close out. They want to be first seed. They don't want to have to worry about the potential of being on energy side of the bracket.
It's realistic. It's realistic that energy is going to be the #1 seed from the other group.
It's likely.
And if you are #1 seed from this, you'll face the #2 seed from that more than likely. And that basically means that you're going to avoid the big boys, the other big boys in Europe, I should say.
For sure. And this was a really good win for Orbit, not just because of the win itself and having that sweep, but now they have played against the composition and the style that Sanguine are going to bring to them in the final set of the day. And they came out on top. We saw them make adjustments to their playstyle. QvoFred trying to force people away from the raw heal. I still think that was more of a mistake on Dignitas at the end, but you did see that adjustment happen, and now they're going to be more prepared fighting into it next game.
Good point. We'll see what Orbit can do. But first of all, take us back through that game, F. Dot, and how Orbit 2-0 Dig.
I mean, it was a fantastic washing machine. It was a fantastic performance, Hinduman, coming out from Orbit, really dominating everything out here. You can see them with 11 points. Obviously, already have their spot at Super Regionals, but certainly bringing it home. And I think that's sort of the statement that Orbit wants to make. Sometimes when we get down to these games, people say, hey, you know, how hard are these guys going to play this set or a third? Orbit, I think last year we might have seen some fun picks. This year, Orbit, they're not aiming for the truck. They're going all the way home.
They're trying to get that first seed going into it right now. Their next set is going to be against Sanguine. If Sanguine win this, then they're going to be the ones with the first seed. And they've been able to adapt to everything that's thrown at them, Orbit, right now. It was Dignitas that ran the Sanguine strategy, and Orbit adapted perfectly to it.
Yeah, it looked pretty different out there, certainly. Dignitas, honestly, when it came down to it, unable to really hold it up. Do you think the guys just sort of lost some of their wins there in game number 2?
I think that they had a little bit of regret having not run the tank strat in the first game. I think they would have had a little bit more momentum at least going into that first game. They wouldn't have been, I mean, you could tell they're definitely demoralized after realizing that their chances to go through to Super Regionals was diminished. But at the same time, you know, Dig has had a whole lot of practice on that tank meta. It's a really difficult strat to pull off, and I mean, when in doubt, tank it out.
Well, you certainly, the gauntlet's still available. Keep in mind, the teams that don't really make it out of here, the teams that do make it out, 2 out of the 4 will go directly onto the Super Regionals. But the teams that don't make it out, they have a second chance in something that we call the gauntlet. We'll break it down pretty much just a little bit. Before we toss it over to the interview, one thing I want to say is that we keep telling you about hi-rez Expo, and we give you these little anecdotes. The biggest thing, when you're watching teams like Orbit, I was down the hallway through 5 doors, a couple of curtains, and I still got to hear Orbit yell and scream when they win. Hearing that type of excitement, hearing that explosion, and being present for it, that's what LAN's all about. And Hinduman standing next to one of the loudest guys I've ever heard. It's him and Trixtank.
It is Trixtank alongside me. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, we're finally secured for regionals now, so pressure off.
Same old boys, though, that we've seen in the Trig days, the TSM days, the Paradigm days, now the Orbit days. You still, guys, aren't as clean as you want to be, though.
Nah, I mean, when we went into this tournament, I think we thought really that we were like very, we were very confident that we were on point this time. But like after seeing like how the other teams played, like they took advantage of our mistakes, and we definitely have more to work on. So I'm just happy that that we came to qualify now.
Now, talk to me a little bit about that, Trixtank, as well, because like the boys that you faced here this weekend, who surprised you the most? Which team came up big for you so far?
I mean, the ones who surprised us is Sanguine, obviously. We won 2-0 against them now. We're going to go up against them after this. And after seeing their matches after our match against them, we're definitely like scared. We're not scared, but we need to respect them the biggest because they seem very strong and they can deliver. So we got to be careful.
And on top of that, I mean, Dignitas kind of did you a favor in that last game, I guess, because they ran a similar comp to what Sanguine do, right?
Yeah.
And how did you feel against that composition?
I mean, it was. I don't think they can execute it as well as Sanguine does it. Obviously, we got that sneaky fire giant, and I think that has something to do with the fact that they haven't practiced the combo. They don't know how to work properly around it as Sanguine does. So we're not that scared for Dig doing it, but Sanguine we might be.
Might be. Well, we'll see how you're doing that one. Obviously, you guys are still playing up against Sanguine for seeding as well, because if you don't beat them here, they'll be #1 and you won't be.
Yeah, we need to go 1-1, so we're hoping for that.
Awesome. Any shouts you want to give to the fans at home before we let you go?
I would like to shout out Orbit. They've been really helpful with our boot camp before this, and they're a really great sponsor, so I hope you guys also give them some shout out there. Other than that, I would like to shout out Hadraja and my mom, because she wanted me to, so I need to do that.
That was good. That was a good idea.
Yeah, and yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much for joining us. Congratulations on qualifying, first of all, and then we'll see you after the break when it faces Sanguine.